The month of January 2023 began on a high as President William Ruto had just spent 4 months in office after being elected as the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya.
Mungu ametunusuru na ametufikisha mwisho wa mwaka wa 2022.
During his New Year's message on 1st January 2023, the head of state had promised to work on the development, progress and prosperity of the nation.
Tofauti ya kisiasa ambayo ni kawaida ya demokrasia. Wachache wetu walijaribu kutugawanya kwa mirengo ama kwa sehemu za ukabila. Mimi nataka niwaambie Wakenya huo msingi, mimi na wenzangu hawa ambao wamechaguliwa pamoja na mimi katika sehemu mbalimbali, tutajenga juu ya hiyo msingi.
That message was soon to be tested. The opposition declared a nationwide opposition protest to protest the current regime and the rising cost of living. Opposition leader Raila Odinga declared on March 9th a countrywide mass action that would culminate in Nairobi on March 20th.
That on 20th March of 2023, we have a date with destiny in Nairobi. Our supporters throughout the country shall stage a massive procession in Nairobi for a legitimate and inclusive government. Save that date. We thank you and let the action begin.
The first round of demonstrations were marred with violence, destruction of property and police killings that raised the eyebrows of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, as well as international bodies. Government leaders had been adamant to throw in the towel to have any talks with the opposition.
We have no business within our government.
Opposition leaders had been tear-gassed, arrested, and even their security withdrawn in an attempt to decapacitate the opposition. In a surprise turn of events on April 2nd, 2023, President William Ruto extended an olive branch to the opposition in a surprise press conference at State House, effectively marking a turn point for the country after 2 weeks of protests.
In these circumstances, and in view of the recent events that led to loss of life and destruction of property in the demonstrations that have occasioned in our country for the last 2 weeks, I urge my brother Raila Odinga and the opposition to call off the demonstrations.
The head of state at the press briefing for the first time proposed a bipartisan parliamentary process to work on the issues that had been highlighted by the opposition. The issues included the audit of the 2022 elections, reinstatement of the Cherera 4, and the cost of living.
The IEBC selection panel and the future process of recruitment of its commissioners could as well be part of a conversation leading to constitutionally and legally binding proposals through a bipartisan parliamentary process. In other words, I am suggesting that the issues that have been raised by our friends on the matter of IEBC, my suggestion is that this matter can be handled in Parliament by a bipartisan parliamentary process so that we can agree on what it is they have an issue with.
The reconciliatory tone seems to have ceded ground as the opposition later that night called off the government protests, agreeing to enter into a constitutional, open-ended and binding dialogue with the government.
Serve our rights to call for demonstrations should this process not bear fruit. Should there be no meaningful engagement or response from Hon Ruto to our counter-offer, we resolve to resume our demonstrations after 1 week.
This laid groundwork for the two sides, government and opposition, to choose teams that would be at the forefront of the dialogue. The bipartisan talks also had its fair share of turbulence after the first team failed to agree on the issues to be discussed. Following the failure of the dialogue, A second round of protests was called on June by the opposition, accusing the government of a non-commitment in the talks. Subsequently, the formation of the second team was done, which was led by Kalonzo Musyoka and Kimani Ichung'wah. The NADCO National Dialogue Committee team presented its report on December after months of listening to stakeholders and retreating to write the report.
I want to congratulate all the teams that were involved in the dialogue process. They have come up with recommendations. I have seen the recommendations. They are in good stead. All the recommendations they have made, they are practical. We are going to work on those recommendations. Within the opposition, the House seems to not be in order, especially after the release of the report by the NADCO team. Azimio principal and NARC Kenya leader Martha Karua rejected the committee's report, insisting that the party is within the Azimio coalition but do not agree with the report.
It has nothing to alleviate the suffering of citizens, but it offers goodies to the leadership. This is totally unacceptable. It is a fraud upon Kenyans. It should be frowned upon and totally rejected. Do not debate over semantics. The stand of NARC Kenya, total rejection. Sure. But we remain an integral part of Azimio, democratic coalition where dissenting doesn't mean disrespect. We differ with respect.
That key moment proves to have an effect on how the opposition will conduct itself in 2024. In 2023 as well, Kenya was treated to a late-night press briefing by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, who accused the government of intimidation and blackmailing on his son. A furious Uhuru Kenyatta daring the government to come for him and not for his family or for his son.
This incident, I leave to the lawyers, because they should tell me what they want with my children. Yeah? Do they want? They've removed their security. Now I hear they want to remove their personal weapons. So what? Are they wanting to do that because they are planning something? And if they are planning something, yeah, my only plea, don't plan against my mother, don't plan against my children, plan for me.
This was an unprecedented face-off between a former head of state and a sitting president. Through Executive Order Number 2 of 2023, President William Ruto in October reshuffled his cabinet, a move that analysts say was meant to tame sharp and loose tongues from some of the cabinet secretaries. Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi was also appointed the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs, as the Cabinet Secretary Dr. Alfred Mutua was moved to the Tourism Ministry. The Ministry of Trade has been collapsed, and its holder, Moses Kuria, named the CS in charge of the Ministry of Public Service, replacing former Malindi Member of Parliament Aisha Jumwa, among other reappointments. Indeed, Kenya's political landscape has served geographic moments in the year 2023, and one can only wait to see what it holds in 2024. Cynthia Nanjala for EBN TV.
Thank you very much, Cynthia Nanjala, for such a conclusive report. Now, moving on, President William Ruto on his campaigns in 2022 said that the climate change will be key to the government's agenda and made an ambitious pledge to ramp up clean energy and phase out fossil fuels for electricity by 2030. During his inauguration speech, the head of state said the country's women, men, and young people, farmers, workers, and local communities suffer the consequences of climate change that affects them. Emmanuel Marwa gives us the full report.
Aya, Nairobi amjambo, Nairobi amjambo.
As one of the agenda that President William Ruto spearheaded to work on if elected during the 2022 campaigns, he said that the climate change will be the key to the government's agenda and made an ambitious pledge to ramp up clean energy and phase out fossil fuels for electricity by 2032.
William Samoei Ruto.
After elected 15th President of the Republic of Kenya during his inauguration speech, he said the country suffered the consequences of climate emergency that affects the people at large. The president earlier this year announced that the government had made available an extra 2 billion shilling in addition to 3.2 billion given earlier to tackle famine in the country.
Among the central concerns of my government will be climate change in our country. women and men, young people, farmers, workers, and local communities suffer the consequences of climate emergency. It is not too late to respond. To tackle this threat, we must act urgently to keep global heating levels below the 1.5 Celsius, help those in need, and end addiction to fossil fuels. Africa has the opportunity to lead the world. We have immense potential for renewable energy. Reducing costs of renewable energy technologies make this the most viable energy source. Kenya is on transition to clean energy that will support jobs, local economies, and sustainable industrialization. In Kenya, we will lead this endeavor by reaffirming our commitment to transition to 100% clean energy by 2030. We call on all our brothers and sisters in our continent to join us in this journey. As members of the international community, we shall support a successful climate summit in Africa in November by championing delivery of finance and technology needed for Africa to adapt to climate impacts, support those in need, and manage the transition. My administration is ready to work with global partners to fight pandemics and other health emergencies. We are also committed to promoting Kenya's vigilance and efficacy in responding to emerging public health challenges. We stand ready to play our role in the collective effort to keep the public safe. I call upon countries that have developed vaccines to make them available to us.
President William Ruto has appealed to various organizations to incorporate climate change in its scope of activities. The unprecedented wave of challenges, the president explained, calls for effective and transformative collaboration in sensitizing the communities about climate change and ways of building resilience. The president initiated his agenda on planting trees to mitigate climate change that affects millions of people in Kenya and the African continent at large. He said the government is targeting to plant 15 billion trees by the end of 2032 and urged the society to use its capacity to mobilize communities to complement the government's tree planting programs.
We acknowledge the pattern of extreme climatic conditions, of alternate drought and floods in various parts of the country as being connected to climate change. I request you to use your existing capacity to mobilize communities and volunteers to complement our tree planting program. It is our aim to plant 5 billion trees in the next 5 years, and the initiative rolled out by the Red Cross is an excellent start. I expect you to go further and join us in sensitizing our communities about climate change and ways of building resilience through innovative programs to enhance food security. As I assume my new role as your patron, I am encouraged by your legacy of admirable accomplishments and motivated by the prospects of effective and transformative collaboration, even as we stride into a brave new world of challenges unprecedented in type and scale. With your profile as an effective institution, powerfully grounded vision, resonant mission, and formidable body of staff, members, and volunteers, there is every reason to be optimistic. I therefore look forward to a strong, productive partnership in being there for our people to offer relief during emergency and preparedness at all times.
The President William Ruto and his cabinet secretaries agreed and called for concerted efforts in environmental protection to mitigate the effects of climate change by marking a tree planting day that is November 13th every year. President appealed to Kenyans to support the government tree planting exercise to increase the country's tree cover. Through the Minister of Interior and Coordination, CS Kithure Kindiki, announced the tree planting date to be 13th of November each year through a Gazette notice that was agreed on to be a holiday to enable Kenyans participate on planting trees to ensure the country in future has better climatic conditions. Later on, government sets up a national public holiday in hope of planting 15 billion trees by 2032 to tackle climate crisis and reforestation amid the worsening impacts such as severe drought in the country and the wider Horn of Africa region. During the tree planting day at Key Wetland in Makindu, Makueni County, President William Ruto and other leaders urged Kenya to cease encroachment on the nation's wetlands and forests, emphasizing the importance of safeguarding water catchment areas that will ensure the country has better climatic conditions, a better environment, regular and adequate rains to support agriculture. During the event, 150,000 seedlings were planted as part of the national campaign aimed to utilizing the short rains to grow 100 million seedlings across the country. The president said the government will gazette and protect the encroachment areas in Makueni County.
Tumeenda tukaishi wetland, tukaenda tukaweka kilimo mahali ambapo haifai, na ndio sababu hiyo tuko na matatizo makubwa, hata yanatuletea matatizo ya kuwa na chakula. Katika mambo ya cost of living ni kuhakikisha kwamba tunalinda mazingira yetu, maji ipatikane, mvua ipatikane, tuzalishe chakula ili tuondoe njaa katika taifa letu. Katika mambo ya cost of living ni kuhakikisha kwamba tunalinda mazingira yetu, maji ipatikane, mvua ipatikane, tuzalishe chakula ili tuondoe njaa katika taifa letu la Kenya.
We support these efforts. Hapa kitambo tukiwa watoto wadogo, hii mto ya Makindu River ilikuwa na maji, ilikuwa na samaki, na hata tulikuwa tunaogelea ndani ya hiyo mto. Kweli si kweli? Na leo ni siku ya kihistoria kwa sababu wao umekuja, na tunajua in another 2-3 years mto wetu utarudi, utakuwa na maji na utakuwa na samaki.
We take action, and the action should be first we gazette all the wetlands ambazo sio Ukambani peke yake, so that we also tame encroachment.
The Kenya Kwanza cabinet secretaries all led the tree planting exercise across the other 46 counties. Soipan Tuya, the cabinet secretary for environment, climate change and forestry, she encouraged residents to support the government's initiative tree planting program. The government officials led tree planting activities in different areas of the country, say that the Kenya Kwanza administration will ensure the agenda is fully implemented.
Waomba wananchi tushikane pamoja ili tuweze kufaulu kupanda 15 billion trees na tutapambana na mambo ya climate change.
The planting here, and I know all over Kenya, was done by young people. Na wengine tumekutana na wao wamepata pesa, wanafurahi. I think this 15 billion job can be done easily by young people of Kenya wakipewa pesa kidogo na wakiendelea.
Later on, President William Ruto attended the EAC High-Level Forum on Climate Change and Food Security in Arusha in Tanzania. President Ruto said Africa will showcase its assets, including hard-working and skilled human capital, immense renewable energy reserves, and the largest swaths of uncultivated arable land. He pointed out that these resources offer the globe the best opportunity for global green industrialization and thus the ability of decarbonize manufacturing. In the forum, he said Africa will therefore be calling for the signing of a new charter on financing that will reform the current international financial system, which is not suited to the climate change era. Kenya, the EAC and Africa, he explained, are building a global coalition that will help give the world the necessary new dawn that will aid in mitigating the effects of climate change.
When we had the Africa Climate Summit, the biggest conversation that was in that climate summit is about climate finance. And it comes in different ways. Many of our economies, many of our countries are struggling because of the effects of climate change. Many countries are spending more mitigating the effects of climate change, whether it is drought, whether it is floods, whether it is mudslides. We're spending more money managing the effects of climate change than on health or food security. And to be able to manage the balance between what you are spending on climate change and what you are spending on social service, it is necessary for us to work on climate financing. How do we reform the international financial architecture
that was fashioned before the advent of climate change.
President William Ruto laid out steep objectives for Africa Inauguration Climate Summit as he opened 3 days of ministerial discussion talks and panel events. President Ruto urged African governments to increase their investment in green opportunities to unlock the continent's potential, calling for investment in renewable energy, green industrialization, climate-smart agriculture, and nature conservation. He said Africa must prepare to become a global hub in green industrial supply chain.
EcoCloud, one of Africa's largest green data centers using geothermal steam, are setting up what will become Africa's largest data center with ICT load capacity of 60 megawatts. They are going to be spending $600 million in this project that will be 100% powered by green energy. In our midst, we have Amos Siwoi, Chief Executive. Is he here? We have Ribingale John Anthony, Consulting Engineer from that space. I don't know whether he's here. And we have Joseph Njenga, Chief Executive Officer. Are they here? Thank you very much. Those gentlemen are working on data centers that will be powered by green. Last, AMIA Africa from the UAE, in collaboration with Geothermal Development Company, involved in drilling and development of geothermal fields. Phase 1 investment to reach US dollars 800 million, anticipated 200 megawatts of geothermal power.
Reporting for EBN TV, Effects of Climate Change 2023, I'm Emmanuel Maro.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Mara, for such an extensive and exclusive report. Moving on, a quick glance into some developing news in one of the East Africa community countries. Provisional election results are expected to be released in the Democratic Republic of Congo later next week. The presidential results, however, have been released where Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo has been declared president for a second term with 73%. Election observers from the Catholic and Protestant churches have released their preliminary report on the election, citing several irregularities during the voting process. The religious leaders say the irregularities may undermine some results, but noted that one presidential candidate stood out. And now, the pictures that you're seeing in your screens right now show Felix Tshisekedi as he arrives at his party's headquarters in the capital, Kinshasa, ahead of his expected announcement as the winner of elections that opposition leaders have dismissed as a sham. Tshisekedi, who is 60 years of age, has been in power since January 2019 and is running for a second 5-year term. By Saturday evening, with 17.8 million votes counted, he was leading with 72%. And once the results were announced, he had a whopping 73% as the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And now for the final time, we are heading into the world of sports. This being our last sports bulletin, Kenyans who are into sports have something to smile about following what has largely been a successful year in the world of sports. From Faith Kipyegon breaking 3 world records to Malkia strikers being crowned Africa champions in the volleyball court, Kenyan sportsmen and women have done the country proud. Our reporter Dennis Toromo highlights the successes and failures of the Kenyan sports calendar, and with that, from the EBN News Desk, we will be declaring an end to the sports.
What a year it has been for Kenya, as the year 2023 will go down as one of the most memorable years in the rich history of the Kenyan sporting industry. From the heartbreaks experienced in the rugby world to the remarkable performance registered by the Kenyan athletes in both road races and track events, the year had mixed fortunes. We're starting with the best highlights that made headlines in sports industry. Faith Kipyegon became a household name in 2023 thanks to her incredible performance on the track. The 29-year-old did something that has never been done in the recent years, breaking 3 world records within 2 months. Kipyegon started by smashing Genzebe Dibaba's 1,500 meters world record in Florence when she obliterated the field to cross the finishing line in 3 minutes and 49 seconds, becoming the first woman to run under 3 minutes and 50 seconds.
The Olympic champion and world champion, she's done both of those things twice before, but she's never broken the world record.